Something interesting happened to me a little while ago. It was before a church service, and we had just finished music rehearsal, and I begun to pray, because that tends to be the thing you do when you need to transition between elements of a Sunday morning. My heart was tender that morning. I can't recall entirely, but I think I had just received some sort of bad news on the drive-in, and my heart sunk a little bit and was tender. The way it does when you hear of another earthquake or civil unrest in a distant country, or the passing of a faithful parishioner. And the prayer just came out of my mouth, and maybe I didn't realize what I was saying in the moment, but I said it, and it was something along the lines of, Lord, we want the real Jesus. We want the Jesus we read about in the Bible, the one who heals poor people, the Jesus that melts hearts and changes the spots of the lepers and raises the dead. We long for the real thing. Does that experience sound familiar to you? Yeah, I think if I could put a label on it, I might call it unmet expectations. It's the feeling that what you thought and believed and worked towards, fought for, would happen, but then it doesn't. It's the feeling of when you go to ask for prayer for the 1,000th time and your prayer doesn't get answered again. And then maybe add a little bit of sting on top of that, the person next to you goes up for prayer and it's their first time and their prayer is answered almost immediately. It's painful. It's disillusioning, it's disappointing. And that's the place where doubts can set in. There's plenty of reasons we can experience doubt and seasons of doubt. For one, D.A. Carson's book on doubt lists 10 reasons for doubt. And number 7 is sleep deprivation. So unmet expectations, they happen. They happen all the time. And it can bring us into places of doubt. But is that so bad? We tend to think of doubt as a bad thing. But what if doubt, as Dr. A.J. Swoboda suggests, is a legitimate place to experience the living God? Let's start by defining what doubt is and isn't. Doubt is not the same thing as unbelief. John Mark Comer says unbelief is the stubborn refusal to believe. Unbelief is the kid who puts his fingers in his ears when they don't want to hear it anymore. Doubt, on the other hand, is the struggle to believe. And in the secular society we live in today, doubt is basically the air we're breathing. Now, I wish I could tell you that as a pastor, I don't struggle with doubt, but that's not the case at all. I struggle in my belief. And I've come to learn that that's not a terrible thing. It's not a totally bad thing. It's my belief, after all, not my parents' belief. It's not something given to me to accept blindly. It's mine. And because I take responsibility for it, I am accountable for it. I am accountable for the way I search for truth and how I live it out, and so are you. So sometimes it's a personality thing. Some people just find it easier to accept things than others, and that just doesn't happen to be me. So I doubt. And that's okay. It's important for us to know that the opposite of doubt isn't certainty. I don't know if there is anything in life we can have 100% certainty about, but that doesn't mean we can't have knowledge of truth. I can't be 100% certain that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, but I have it on good and informed authority that it will. I can trust it to do so. The opposite of doubt is not certainty, it's trust. Faith is a word that we could use to substitute this, but I think it's come to mean something in our culture that I don't intend to say. Scholars agree that the word trust is probably a better word to describe the call of humanity to the reality of God. We need to trust. Now, if you think Christians, all Christians live out this kind of blind faith, simply believing the words of a fairy tale book, then you really haven't done your homework. On the world stage of philosophy and science, historical and archaeological accuracy, Christianity is far from retreat. All that is to say that certainty isn't the end goal of the Christian walk. It's trust in Jesus, in who he says he is, what he came to do, and the life he offers fully devoted followers. He is the Sherpa on the mountain that you would be wise to heed the urgent advice of, because your life is at stake otherwise. We can trust him. Our friend Doubting Thomas in John 20 gets a bad rap. But you know what? Take a look at the passage together with me. If you know the story, this is the climax of John's account of the good news of Jesus. Jesus has just risen from the grave, and the disciples aren't sure what to make of it all. They were expecting a leader that would help them crush their enemies. Instead, they got a leader who told them to love their enemies. And even more, that leader was crushed in the most horrific manner by those very same enemies. Imagine the disappointment. But now something has happened. The tomb is empty, and Jesus appears to the 2 women who came to honor his deceased body. So, verse 19, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Verse 20, after he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Verse 24, now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Thomas is a believer from the get-go. He saw the miracles of Jesus. He was with Jesus. He was even ready to die with Jesus. We can only imagine the kind of disillusionment he's experiencing. This Jesus was the guy who was supposed to change it all, and now he's gone. Thomas's expectations are completely shattered. We can only speculate why he wasn't in the room with the others initially. Maybe it was because the disappointment was just too much to bear to be able to deal with the reality that Jesus was now gone. Too many memories, too much hurt, too much to process. So Thomas doubts. He's told that the other disciples have seen Jesus, and he's not going for it. He doesn't want the wool pulled over his eyes, and I don't blame him. It's too important of a matter otherwise. He wanted the real Jesus. And I mean, so do I. So do you. Thomas didn't want the idea of Jesus. He wanted the real thing. You know, I have friends who just have the hardest time with seafood. I'm a lover of seafood myself. I got some of my mom's recipes for a Portuguese-style meal, and it's just so good. From time to time, I invite people over for a good seafood meal. There's tons of fresh bread and shrimp, mussels, scallops, oysters, all of it, lots of garlic, lots of lemon juice, and it's just a really good time. Now, when I initially invite friends, some of them become hesitant. Most of their experiences with seafood tend to revolve around bad memories of not enjoying the smells or the tastes, or maybe all they know about seafood is from Red Lobster. But as soon as they try this recipe, they come to find out all of a sudden that they love it. And now I just get to have more seafood eating parties because now they love it so much and they want to come over more often. And it's great. I have found that most people don't actually dislike seafood. What they dislike is bad seafood. Do you know people who have a bad taste in their mouth about Christianity? You know what I find is the problem? They tend to not hate Jesus. They just hate bad religion. What they want is the authentic, real experience, to come and taste and see the goodness of God. They need and want the real Jesus and real, fully devoted followers of him. Thomas needed the real Jesus. Thomas needed the disillusionment of unmet expectations to prepare him for the real Jesus. See, disillusionment isn't a bad thing at all, is it? It's the removal of the illusion. If we say we are seekers who are committed to truth, then disillusionment is actually a great gift. When Thomas finally sees the Lord, the idea of who he thought Jesus was comes to full revelation, and he worships. N.T. Wright points out, he, Thomas, is the first person in the book of John to look at Jesus of Nazareth and address the word God directly to him. This is the gift of doubt. In his book, A Grief Observed, C.S. Lewis describes his journey of doubt and anguish concerning his late wife. At one point, he talks about a picture he had of Joy, his wife. He reflected on how he fell more in love with the photo of his wife than his actual wife. And then he says these words, I need Christ, not something that resembles him. A really good photograph might become, in the end, a snare, a horror, and an obstacle. My idea of God is not a divine idea. It has to be shattered time after time, and he shatters it himself. He is the great iconoclast. Could we not almost say that this shattering is one of the marks of his presence? Maybe doubt and disillusionment is a legitimate place to experience the living God. Have you ever thought that? Hey, did you notice how long it took Jesus to show up to Thomas? A week. An entire week. Imagine the turmoil in Thomas when every day and every hour passes by and he doesn't get the answers he's looking for yet. Don't be surprised if God doesn't give you the answers you're looking for immediately, or even in this life. There might be a greater gift he has in store for you instead. And by the way, just remember, friends, in the end, heaven will be the greatest disillusionment. We will see Jesus for who he is, and we will worship. So what do we do with doubters? Well, for one, join the club. Our calling is to trust in Jesus in our doubting. Do you know people who aren't in the room because they're struggling to believe? Well, the book of Jude says to show them mercy. Hey, have you ever thought of this? What if our missionaries of tomorrow are our doubters of today? Church tradition holds that Thomas became a missionary to India. And did you know that for 2,000 years, there's a community of Thomas Christians in India because a doubter went all the way to India and revolutionized a society? Are you struggling with doubt today? Look at the response of Jesus to Thomas. He shows up to Thomas and doesn't blast Thomas with guilt. Jesus shows up in full gentleness and shows himself, scars and all. The only God who would be caught dead with scars is Jesus after all. And he shows up to Thomas. Jesus has great compassion for doubters, for you and for me. So doubt well, process well. Ask the hard questions in Christian community. Borrow faith from another to carry you through the hard times. Refuse to stick your fingers in your ears and refuse hard hearts and enter into life of trust that God is good. Let me end with this Eugene Peterson style beatitude from John Mark Comer. Blessed, happy, and fortunate, so well off and at peace are those followers of Jesus who, even when life is hard and their dream is crushed, when the diagnosis is lousy, when they have more questions than answers and live in the fog of confusion and can't chart a way out of it all. They don't fall away into sin. They don't walk away from God. Instead, they trust. They sit and wait. Whatever comes, comes. They are okay, happy even, because the settled condition of their heart is to live in reliance on the goodness of God.